I worked emergency dispatch and field response support in Southern Ohio for almost 9 years. Most people think 911 is chaos. Car crashes, heart attacks, domestic disputes, missing kids. The worst moments of people's lives compressed into a headset. They're right, but that's not what made me quit. What made me quit were the incidents that never received case numbers. The ones that never appeared in reports. The calls we were ordered to erase. The calls everyone pretended never happened. And before I tell you about those calls, I need you to understand something. Every dispatcher has a voice they remember. Maybe it's a terrified child. Maybe it's a husband trying to perform CPR. Maybe it's somebody's final words. For me, it was a woman named Emily Harper. Because according to every official record in Ohio, Emily Harper never called 911. The first time I heard her voice was during a slow shift in October. Rain hammered the station windows. Most units were handling weather-related accidents. I was covering emergency intake. At exactly 2:14 a.m., a call appeared on my screen. No caller ID, no location data. That wasn't impossible. It happened occasionally. What was strange was the audio. The moment I answered, I heard heavy breathing, then a woman whispering, "Please don't disconnect." I asked her location. Standard procedure. She ignored the question. "Please listen carefully." Her voice trembled, like she'd been crying for hours. "There are people outside." I asked for her address again. Nothing. Then she said something that made me pause. "They keep changing." I remember glancing at my supervisor. He was busy on another line. I focused back on the call. "What do you mean?" The woman hesitated, then whispered, "They don't stay the same person." A chill crawled through me. People say strange things during emergencies. Drugs, mental illness, panic. But her voice didn't sound irrational. She sounded exhausted, terrified, and completely sincere. I tried tracing the call. Nothing. No location. No routing information. Just static. Then another voice appeared. A man's voice. Far away. Outside wherever she was. Calling her name. Emily. The woman immediately stopped breathing. Not literally, but every sound vanished. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "He found me." The line disconnected. I waited for reconnect. Nothing happened. No callback. No trace. No location. Just an empty log. I wrote an incident note. 10 minutes later, my supervisor deleted it. I watched him do it. No explanation. No discussion. Just gone. When I asked why, he stared at me for several seconds. Then said something I'd never heard before. "If that number calls again, transfer it to me." That was it. No further explanation. The next night, the same number appeared. 2:14 a.m. Exactly. The second I saw it, my stomach tightened. I answered. The woman was crying. Not loud. Quiet. Broken. Like someone trying not to be heard. "Emily," I asked. Silence. Then, "You remembered." I asked where she was. She ignored me again. Instead, she asked something strange. "What date do you have?" I checked my screen. October 17th. The woman started sobbing. Actual sobbing. Uncontrolled. Then she whispered, "No." I frowned. "What do you mean? It's not October." I felt the hairs on my arms rise. She sounded genuinely confused. Not delusional. Confused. Like I had given her impossible information. Then she said, "It was supposed to be July." Before I could respond, I heard the same male voice. Closer this time, calling her name. The line cut instantly. My supervisor was already walking toward me. He had somehow known. Without saying a word, he unplugged my headset, then deleted the call. Again, I followed him into his office, demanded an explanation. He closed the door, locked it, then asked me one question. "Did she ask you what date it was?" The question hit me like ice water. I nodded. His face lost color. For a moment, he looked genuinely frightened. Then he told me something that made no sense. "If she calls again, do not answer any questions." What? Do not tell her the date. I laughed. Actually laughed. Because the situation was absurd. He wasn't laughing. "Listen carefully," he said. "If she calls again, transfer the line immediately." "Who is she?" He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "Some incidents aren't emergencies." Then he unlocked the door. Conversation over. That should have been the end of it. But 3 nights later, Emily called again. And this time she knew my name. The call came, at 2:14 a.m. Exactly. Like always. I answered before anyone else could. The line was silent. Then, Michael. My blood froze. I never gave her my name. Not once. Nobody had. I checked the console. The call still had no location. No routing data. Nothing. Just an impossible connection. I asked how she knew who I was. Her answer made no sense. You told me. I stared at the screen. No, I didn't. Long pause. Then she whispered, not yet. And that's when I realized something was very wrong. Because she wasn't joking. She sounded confused. Like she genuinely believed we'd already had a conversation that hadn't happened. Then she said, you're not supposed to answer this call until next year. And suddenly the line filled with screaming. The screaming wasn't Emily's. At least not entirely. It sounded like dozens of voices layered together. Men, women, children, all speaking at once. The audio overloaded my headset so badly I ripped it off. Several dispatchers looked over. One of them, a veteran named Curtis, went completely pale. Not startled, not confused, terrified. He knew that sound. Before I could ask what was happening, the line went dead. The call vanished from the system. Not disconnected, vanished, like it had never existed. No timestamp, no recording, no call log, nothing. The only proof was the look on Curtis's face. After shift change, I followed him into the parking lot. I asked him how he knew about Emily. For a long time, he refused to answer. Then he lit a cigarette with shaking hands and said something I still think about almost every day. How many times has she called you? I told him 3. He closed his eyes. Then you're already in it. I asked him what it meant. He looked around the empty parking lot before answering. The calls don't come from people in danger. The wind rattled the chain link fence nearby. Curtis stared into the darkness. They come from people who already disappeared. I remember laughing nervously. Not because it was funny, because it was insane. He wasn't smiling. Then he told me a story. 20 years earlier, another dispatcher had received similar calls. Different voice, different name, same pattern. No location, no routing information, no official records. The caller repeatedly claimed they were trapped somewhere. Not physically trapped, lost. The dispatcher became obsessed. Started taking calls at home. Started hearing voices through disconnected phones. Eventually, he vanished. His car was found. His apartment was found. He wasn't. The last thing recovered was a notebook. Every page contained the same sentence. They're calling from tomorrow. At the time, I thought Curtis was messing with me. Or maybe repeating some old station urban legend. Then he asked me something. Has she mentioned dates yet? I didn't answer immediately. The look on his face changed. That was enough. He knew. And suddenly he looked even more frightened than before. Get rid of every calendar you own. I stared at him. What? Just do it. Then he got into his truck and left. The next day he called in sick. The day after that, he resigned. No explanation. No goodbye. Just gone. And 2 nights later, Emily called again. 2:14 a.m. Exactly. This time she sounded different. More exhausted. More desperate. Like she'd been running. I immediately asked where she was. For the first time, she answered. Sort of. Ohio. I nearly slammed my fist into the desk. Finally, a location. But before I could press further, she added, not your Ohio. The room suddenly felt colder. What does that mean? Emily didn't answer directly. Instead, she asked another question. What year do you have? I remember my supervisor's warning. Don't answer. Don't tell her the date. For several seconds, I stayed silent. Then Emily began crying. Please. Her voice cracked. Please tell me. Against my better judgment, I looked at the calendar hanging near the dispatch desk. 2027. The moment I said it, the line went silent. Completely silent. No breathing. No background noise. Nothing. Then Emily whispered, oh God. The way she said it made my stomach turn. Not fear. Not confusion. Recognition. Like she just learned something horrifying. Then she asked, how many are missing now? I didn't understand. What? How many dispatchers disappeared? I felt cold all over. Before I could respond, she continued, did Curtis disappear yet? My heart nearly stopped. I hadn't mentioned Curtis. Nobody had. I asked how she knew that name. Emily ignored me. Again. Instead, she said, you need to leave. The male voice appeared immediately afterward, closer than ever, right beside her, not outside anymore, right beside her. I heard footsteps, then a door opening, then Emily screaming. The call ended at 2:15 a.m., exactly 1 minute after it began. The next morning, I learned Curtis hadn't simply resigned. Nobody could find him. His apartment was empty. His truck was abandoned near an old state highway, and his phone kept calling 911 over and over, every few hours. When officers answered, nobody spoke, only static. A week passed without another call. Then something stranger happened. I found a report, not in our active system, in an archive database nobody used anymore. The file dated back 17 years. It contained dozens of deleted incident records, all erased, all linked to unidentified calls. And every single one occurred at 2:14 a.m. I started reading. The names changed. The voices changed. The dispatchers changed. But the pattern remained identical. Caller requests date. Caller asks about missing personnel. Caller references future events. Call terminated. Then I found something worse. A name. Emily Harper. The file wasn't recent. It was dated 2018, 9 years earlier. According to the report, Emily Harper worked as an emergency dispatcher in Ohio. My blood ran cold because the attached photograph showed the same woman whose voice had been calling me. The same woman, the same name, the same person. And according to official records, she disappeared in 2018, 9 years before she started calling me. I sat there staring at her personnel photo for almost 10 minutes. Then my supervisor walked in. The moment he saw the file on my screen, his expression changed. He knew exactly what I'd found. For the first time since all this started, he stopped pretending. He closed the office door, then quietly said, "You should never have opened that archive." I pointed at the photograph. "That's her." He nodded. "Yes." She disappeared. Another nod. "Yes." "Then who's calling me?" The room remained silent. Finally, he answered, "We don't know." That answer scared me more than any explanation could have, because he wasn't hiding information. He genuinely didn't know. And if someone like him didn't know, then nobody did. He eventually told me what little the state had uncovered. Every few years, certain dispatch centers received impossible calls. Calls from missing operators, missing paramedics, missing officers, people who had vanished years earlier, sometimes decades earlier. The callers always seemed confused about time, always asked for dates, always tried warning whoever answered. And eventually, the person receiving the calls disappeared too. I remember laughing again, not because it was funny, because panic was starting to feel normal. Then my supervisor handed me a folder. Inside were photographs, missing personnel, dispatchers, emergency responders, police officers, 37 people, all vanished, all connected to the calls. And every photograph had one thing in common: their eyes. Every single person looked exhausted, like they hadn't slept in weeks. The same look Curtis had before he disappeared. The same look I'd started seeing in my own mirror. Then my supervisor showed me the final photograph. And that's when everything became worse. Because the photograph wasn't old. It was recent, very recent, taken only 3 days earlier. It showed a group of missing personnel standing together in what looked like an abandoned dispatch center. Old equipment, dead monitors, broken desks, dust everywhere. The image was grainy, poor quality, but I immediately recognized one face. Emily, standing in the center, looking directly at the camera. And beside her was Curtis, both of them staring at whoever took the picture. And taped to the monitor behind them was a handwritten note. 3 words. He answered too. The problem was, the handwriting looked exactly like mine. The dispatcher called me back 20 minutes later. Her voice sounded wrong. Not scared, not nervous, just distracted, like she was reading something while talking to me. "Unit 12, can you return to the station?" I glanced at the clock. 3:14 a.m. "What happened?" I asked. A pause. Then she said, "We received another call from the same address." My stomach tightened. "The farmhouse." "Yes, that's impossible." Another pause. Then she quietly replied, "The caller requested you by name." For a second, I thought she was joking. Nobody outside the department knew my radio designation. Most callers didn't even know who responded to them. "Who was it?" I asked. The dispatcher hesitated. Then she said, they identified themselves as Jacob Miller, the dead homeowner, the man we'd found hanging from a beam 6 years earlier. I didn't answer. Neither did she. Eventually she whispered, "You need to come back." The line disconnected. The station felt different when I returned. Too quiet. Every television was off. Every radio was muted. Half the night shift crew stood around a conference table, staring at a printed transcript. Nobody spoke. I walked over and looked down. The call log was only 30 seconds long. Dispatch. 911. What's your emergency? Caller. Is Daniel there? Dispatch. Who? Caller. Daniel Harper. My name. Dispatch. Sir, who is this? Caller. He knows me. Dispatch. What's your name? Caller. Jacob Miller. Then silence. 10 seconds later. Caller. Tell him they found the door. End of call. I read the transcript 3 times. The room remained silent. Finally, Captain Reeves spoke. What door? Nobody answered, because none of us knew. But the moment I read those words, something stirred in the back of my memory. A report. An old report. One I'd seen months earlier. A file that had been buried in storage. Missing persons investigation. 3 hikers vanished inside a section of woodland 30 miles east of Columbus. The search lasted 11 days. The final report contained a strange, handwritten note from one of the volunteers. A note the department never explained. I remembered it perfectly now. Do not open the door if you find it. At the time, I'd assumed it was a joke. Now I wasn't so sure. I went looking for the file. The archives occupied the station basement. Rows of metal cabinets stretched into darkness beneath buzzing fluorescent lights. Most reports sat untouched for decades. It took nearly an hour to find the box. Case 44 to 117. The file was thicker than expected. Hundreds of pages. Photographs. Witness statements. Search maps. Most of it looked normal. Until I reached day 7. That's where things became strange. Multiple volunteers reported hearing voices in areas where nobody was present. 2 deputies claimed their compasses spun continuously. 1 search dog refused to enter a particular clearing. Another disappeared entirely. Then came the final page. A photograph. Black and white. Grainy. Taken at dusk. The image showed 6 volunteers standing near a tree line. Behind them sat a rectangular structure. Small. Wooden. Almost like a freestanding doorway. No walls. No building. Just a door frame standing alone in the forest. My pulse quickened. Written beneath the photograph was a single sentence. Structure not present in follow-up search. I stared at the image. The longer I looked, the more wrong it felt. The volunteers appeared frightened. Not posing. Not smiling. Every one of them was staring directly at the door. As if something had opened. And then I noticed something else. One of the volunteers looked familiar. Very familiar. I leaned closer. My heart immediately dropped. The man standing nearest the door wasn't part of the search team roster. He wasn't listed anywhere in the file. But I recognized him, because his photograph hung upstairs in our memorial hallway. Deputy Eric Lawson. Missing since 2003. 16 years after this photo was taken. And yet there he was, standing inside a picture from 1987, watching the doorway, like he'd already been there, like he'd already crossed through. And suddenly I understood why nobody wanted these reports discussed. Because this wasn't a missing persons case anymore. Something else was hiding inside those woods. Something that had been taking people for decades. And according to a dead man calling 911, someone had just found it again. I should have handed the file over and walked away. That would have been the smart thing to do. Instead, I copied everything. Every photograph. Every witness statement. Every map. Then I took the folder home. I told myself I was trying to understand what was happening. The truth is, I was already obsessed. You don't spend years responding to emergencies without developing a need for answers. Every call has a cause. Every scene has evidence. Every death has a sequence of events. That's how the world works. At least, that's how I thought it worked. The problem was that none of this followed those rules. The more I read, the less sense anything made. Over the next few nights, I uncovered dozens of similar reports. Not from one county, not from one decade, from all over Ohio. Different apartments. Different years. Same pattern. People disappeared. Search teams entered a specific area. Someone reported a door. Then records became inconsistent. Names appeared where they shouldn't. Dates stopped matching. Witnesses contradicted themselves. And eventually the case was closed without explanation. The strangest part wasn't the disappearances. It was what happened afterward. In almost every file, someone involved in the search later reported receiving phone calls. Not threatening calls. Not prank calls. Calls from people who had already vanished. The reports never explained that part. Most of those statements had been removed, redacted, buried, but enough remained to reveal the pattern. The missing never stopped communicating. They kept trying to come back. 3 nights later, another call came in. 2:14 a.m. Exactly. I was alone in dispatch when the screen lit up. No number, no location, the familiar blank field. I already knew who it was. The moment I answered, Emily spoke. But something had changed. Her voice sounded clearer, closer, as if she wasn't calling from somewhere far away anymore. Daniel. Hearing my name immediately made my stomach tighten. I hadn't slept properly in days. Dark circles sat beneath my eyes. I knew I looked as exhausted as the people in those photographs. I asked her where she was. For the first time, she answered, "I'm almost there." The words sent a chill through me. Where? Silence. Then, the station. I immediately checked the security monitors. Empty parking lot. Empty entrance. No vehicles. Nobody outside. When I looked back at the console, Emily was still speaking. "They found another door." My throat tightened. "Who found it?" Long pause. Then she whispered, "You did." I stared at the screen. "What are you talking about?" "You just haven't done it yet." The sentence made my head hurt. Everything about these calls felt like a conversation happening out of order. Like Emily was speaking from a future that already existed for her. Then I heard something in the background. Footsteps. Not one set. Many. Hundreds. Soft. Shuffling. Moving together. The sound filled the line. Emily lowered her voice. "They know you're listening now." A cold wave rolled through me. Who? For several seconds, she didn't answer. Then, "The people who stay." I wanted clarification. I wanted details. Instead, the line suddenly filled with static. The worst static I'd ever heard. Painful. Violent. Like metal grinding against metal. And buried inside it, voices. Thousands of voices. Speaking simultaneously. I couldn't understand the words. But I recognized one thing. They were all saying the same sentence. Over and over. The same phrase. The same warning. And after several seconds, I finally understood it. "Don't open it." The transmission ended instantly. The station fell silent. Then every computer monitor in dispatch shut off. At the same time, every screen, every system, gone. The room plunged into darkness. For a few moments I sat frozen. The only light came from the emergency exit signs. Then one monitor turned back on by itself. Not all of them, just one. The screen displayed a live camera feed. The station parking lot. I leaned forward. The image looked normal. Empty. Rain falling. No vehicles. Nothing unusual. Then I noticed someone standing near the far fence. A person. Motionless. Watching the building. I immediately zoomed in. The image sharpened, and my blood turned to ice. The figure was me. Not someone who looked like me. Me. Same face. Same jacket. Same posture. Standing outside in the rain. Watching the station. I ran to the front doors. Threw them open. The parking lot was empty. Completely empty. Nobody stood near the fence. Nobody stood anywhere. When I returned to dispatch, the monitor was black again. Like nothing had happened. I checked the security recordings. The footage didn't exist. The camera had never activated. According to the logs, the system had remained offline the entire time. No recording. No evidence. Nothing. Except I knew what I'd seen. And deep down, I think I knew something else. The version of me outside wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't an imitation. It was me. The same way Emily was still Emily. The same way Jacob Miller still sounded like Jacob Miller. Somehow, the missing weren't dead. They were somewhere else. And whatever that place was, it was getting closer. The next morning, I found an envelope on my desk. No name, no stamp, No indication of how it arrived. Inside was a single photograph, freshly printed. The image showed the dispatch center from above, taken at night. Every patrol vehicle sat parked outside. Every window glowed. The photograph should have been impossible, because the angle wasn't from a helicopter or drone. It looked like it had been taken from directly above the building, hundreds of feet in the air, as if whoever captured it had been hovering there, watching. On the back was a handwritten note. Only 4 words. "We can see you." And beneath the message, a date. Tomorrow's date. Not yesterday. Not today. Tomorrow. That's when I realized something truly horrifying. The calls weren't warnings anymore. They were preparations. And whatever had been communicating with us for years wasn't trying to escape. It was waiting for something. Something scheduled. Something inevitable. Something that would happen tomorrow night at exactly 2:14 a.m. And somehow, I was at the center of it.